Good afternoon. Welcome to Grade 12 English First Additional Language. Today we're going to start with a series of Macbeth lessons. I've asked around and it seems that most of you are done with Act 1 and need to start with Act 2. So we're going to start today with Act 2 and we're going to start with Act 2, Scene 1 and a part of Scene 2. And we are going to discuss every scene in detail. So please have your Macbeth book and your notes with you that you can follow and add notes as I am explaining. So it's a beautiful day to learn something new and we are still able to do so. So here we go. First of all, summary of Act 2, Scene 1. The setting where it takes place is the courtyard at Inverness, Macbeth's castle. Banquo and Fleance is Banquo's son, enter. Banquo expresses his fear of sleep and the evil thoughts that it brings. Macbeth enters and tries to discover how much support he might expect from Banquo. Banquo refuses to accept the implied promise of advancement if he supports Macbeth, the implied promise of advancement. You'll see how we're going to discuss that in detail, where Banquo is making it clear where his support lies. Okay, he says that he's not prepared to do anything that will harm his honor, integrity, and loyalty to Duncan. Left alone, Macbeth waits for Lady Macbeth to ring the bell, which will serve as the signal that everything is ready to continue with Duncan's murder. His guilty conscience and overactive imagination make him see an imaginary dagger which leads him towards Duncan's room. The bell rings and off stage, he proceeds to commit the murder. As I said, the setting Inverness, the court of Macbeth's castle, right? So the setting is a courtyard at Inverness. It is pitch dark and very late at night. Now it's exactly the black night Macbeth asked for to conceal his evil deed. Now enter Banquo and Fleance bearing a torch before him. Now Banquo and Fleance appear with a torch, so they are associated with light. Light is associated with goodness, purity, honor, and integrity. But we see in this scene that Banquo is tense and anxious and unable to sleep because he's troubled by horrible dreams. Now the appearance of Fleance, Banquo's son, serves as a reminder of the witch's prediction that Banquo's children will sit on the throne of Scotland. So here we realize that if Macbeth succeeds in killing Duncan, he will be driven to still more violence before his crown is secure. More violence in the sense is the fact that Fleance is alive means that Macbeth will not be able to remain on the throne. So thus Fleance will be in immediate and mortal danger. Right, on this slide in front of you, this whole discussion is Banquo and Fleance talking to each other, and Banquo is asking, what is the time? And Fleance is just answering, the moon has said it's very dark. He believes it's after midnight already. And here at the end, Banquo says, hold, wait, take my sword. Very important, he gives away his weapon. Right, he goes on, he says there's husbandry in heaven. So heaven is almost like it's saving on light. So the Macbeths got what they wished for, darkness. Their candles are all out. He's talking about the stars. So he's using a metaphor where he's saying the stars are not shining. It's maybe cloudy or overcast, but it's pitch dark outside. And this increases the atmosphere of evil. So it's perfect for the murder of the unsuspecting king. And then he goes on, he says, take thee that too. So he first said, take my sword. And then he hands Fleance another piece of his armor to carry. Now, it's symbolically because Banquo is separated or disassociated from weapons of killing to show us the contrast between Macbeth and Banquo. In this scene, Macbeth is associated with violence because he's ready to kill Duncan. So everything about him is about violence, and Banquo must be the opposite. Remember, Banquo is the foil to Macbeth. And then Banquo goes on at the end and he says, "A heavy summons lies like lead upon me." Right, so he is so very tired. Okay, look at the simile he used there. He's extremely tired and sleepy, but he has great difficulty in sleeping. He goes on, he says, "And yet I would not sleep." So he would prefer not to sleep. He's afraid of the horrible dreams that haunt him in his sleep. So this is the first time the theme of sleeplessness is introduced. Now remember, the theme of sleeplessness is all about sleeplessness represents the lack of peace of mind. And Banquo here doesn't say just exactly what thoughts are disturbing his sleep, but we can guess that they have to do with the witch's prophecies. Banquo then goes on and he says, "Merciful powers, restrain in me the cursed thoughts that nature gives way to repose." So unlike Lady Macbeth, who calls on evil spirits to help her, Banquo begs the heavenly spirits, merciful powers, the angels, to keep the demons away, to protect him from the terrible ideas which surfaced in his dreams. And he goes on, that is the cursed thoughts that he's saying, the forces that are mysterious and dark and that surface in his dreams, that nature gives way to repose. Now, nature is human nature, the inborn human weaknesses and imperfections to which Banquo is vulnerable, particularly in a state of rest and sleep. So he has dreamt about the witches and seems to be plagued or disturbed by their prophecies, but he tries to suppress all thoughts of them. Right, and then Macbeth and a servant enters with a torch, and immediately Banquo is so afraid. He says, "Give me my sword." Because have this picture in your mind. It's dark, very dark, and all that he can see is two figures walking, and he sees the torch. So he does not know who it is. So his fears are so real that he's afraid of the slightest noise, and he talks to Fleance and he says, "Give me my sword." But what is strange is he calls for his sword and immediately is on the defense, even though he is in his friend's castle. And when you are in your best friend's castle, you're supposed to feel safe and to feel at ease, which is not the case here with Banquo. And he asks, "Who's there?" And Macbeth answers, "A friend." And Banquo answers him and is surprised to see that Macbeth is up at this late hour. He tells Macbeth that the king has gone to bed, very pleased with the way Macbeth and Lady Macbeth welcomed and entertained him. He says he was in an uncommon good mood. All right, and this fact makes the murder all the more cruel and horrible. And then he hands Macbeth a diamond that he's supposed to give to Lady Macbeth to acknowledge her hospitality to Duncan. And this is also a reminder of Duncan's loving, grateful, and virtuous nature. And ironically, a diamond is a symbol of purity, innocence, love, fidelity. It signifies trust. So specifically the trust between the giver, that the giver has in the receiver. So the trust that Duncan has in Lady Macbeth. And that's why it's ironic, because the opposite is true. He's not supposed to trust her at all. But again, remember, what was Duncan's fatal flaw? He was too trusting. Right. So, and then Banquo ends by saying the king has gone to bed well content. He was satisfied. He had a very enjoyable evening. Macbeth just answers him and he says that his desire to entertain Duncan was limited by the lack of time to prepare. They could not entertain Duncan as well as they wanted. And then Banquo says, now all's well. I dreamt, and then he starts with the witches. I dreamt last night of the 3 weird sisters. Again, another question from this extract. What is another name for the witches? And there's your answer, the weird sisters. And then he goes on, he says, to you, they have showed some truth. So one of the prophecies regarding you, Macbeth, has come true. And then immediately Macbeth answers him and he says, I think not of them. All right, so it's a deliberate lie by Macbeth. He has not yet stopped thinking about their predictions since he met them. So the theme of appearance versus reality or equivocation is evident here. Banquo openly admits to Macbeth that he has dreamt about the witches. So he's troubled by their predictions. Macbeth, on the other hand, immediately lie to Banquo. So he's concealing his true feelings. He is equivocating. He says one thing, but actually another thing is true. So we can see here the difference between the characters of Macbeth and Banquo is very clearly portrayed here. Banquo is honest and frank. He's open. He frankly admitted to Macbeth of his dreams of the witches, but Macbeth deliberately concealed his heart from him. So thus Banquo is open-hearted and free and honest, while Macbeth is a mean hypocrite. All right, then Macbeth goes on and he suggests that he and Banquo should discuss the witches' prophecies at a more convenient time. Banquo answers, whenever you please, whenever Macbeth should be so kind as to find the time to spare. And then Macbeth starts by almost testing Banquo. So he's testing the waters. He wants to find out exactly Banquo's feelings and where does his loyalty lies with the following discussion. And then he says, if you follow my advice when we discuss the matter, when the time comes, so revealing his secret thoughts, it shall make honor for you. Macbeth promises Banquo that it will be to his advantage if he will support Macbeth when the time comes. So this is the start of the ultimate test to determine with whom Banquo's loyalty lies. And Banquo answers him without a doubt and he says, I agree to support you, Macbeth, provided that he loses no honor in seeking to increase his position. In other words, he will not lend himself to promises of rewards or to foul play. Right? He wishes, he says, but still keep my bosom franchise and allegiance clear. He wishes to keep his heart and conscience free from guilt and his loyalty to Duncan pure. So Banquo will support Macbeth as long as he does not have to compromise his honor. And then he says, I shall be counseled. So Banquo's response here reveals both his insight, intelligence, and his loyalty to Duncan. And with this conversation, where he made it clear where his loyalty lies, he is virtually signing his own death warrant. Remember, Banquo's knowledge of the witches' prophecies makes him both a potential ally and a potential threat to Macbeth's plotting. And with this discussion, Macbeth wanted to find out, is Banquo going to be an ally or a threat? But after this conversation, where Banquo makes no secret of the fact that he will be loyal to Duncan above all else, Macbeth realizes that he has to get rid of Banquo. The fact that Banquo is aware of the prophecies will make him suspicious of Macbeth after the killing of Duncan, and that is how he virtually signed his own death warrant. Macbeth answers him, "Good repose the while. In the meantime, or for the present, rest well." So it might just seem like someone wishing the other person well, but in this case, it's an ominous reaction. Ominous meaning something bad is going to happen. So Macbeth now knows that Banquo is beyond giving in to temptation. He's not going to be an ally. So he will have to get rid of him too. And Banquo said, "Thanks, sir, the like to you." And Banquo and Fleance left. Now Macbeth is left alone with a servant, and he speaks to the servant where he says, "Go bid thy mistress, when my drink is ready, she strike upon the bell." So now the striking of the bell, the ringing of the bell, was the signal that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have agreed upon, which will indicate that the way is clear to murder Duncan. Remember, there was certain preparations that Lady Macbeth had to make before Macbeth can go and kill Duncan. So Lady Macbeth has finished her task of making the guards drunk and getting everything ready. And he says, "After you spoke to the mistress, get thee to bed." And the servant left. So, and this is where the scene starts, where he sees the imaginary dagger. And he's talking, "Is this dagger which I see before me, the handle toward my hand? Come, let me clutch thee, let me grab thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. I can't touch you, I can't grab you, but I still see you. Art thou not fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight?" Fatal vision is the deadly dagger. "Are you not sensible to feeling as to sight?" He asks the dagger, which he calls a deadly or an ominous vision, whether it can be both touched and seen. "Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain?" Then he wonders if the dagger, is it a dagger of the mind? Is it something false created by his feverish, disordered, unbalanced mind or brain? So the dagger that Macbeth sees shows his sensitivity and overactive imagination. He pictures this dagger floating in the air in front of him. However, each time he tries to catch hold of the dagger, he clutches empty air only, and the dagger moves out of his reach. Because remember, it is only a hallucination or an illusion. It's an image of Macbeth's guilt and horrified awareness of the evil action he is about to perform. And then he goes on, he still sees the dagger. "I see thee yet." It is like I can touch you. It's in a touchable form. "As this which now I draw." It seems to be as real as his own dagger, which he then draws. And then he says, "Thou marshals me the way that I was going." This imaginary dagger still floats in the air before him, pointing the way, pointing the way to the room in which Duncan is sleeping. And such an instrument I was to use. It's the same. He plans to use a dagger just like this one to kill Duncan. And then he goes on, "Mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses, or else worth all the rest." Either my eyes are playing tricks on me, or they are showing him something real which are hidden from his other senses. So his eyes are then worth more than all the other senses together. The theme of appearance versus reality evident here. The dagger seems to be real, so it appears to be real, but in reality it's only an illusion or a hallucination. And then he says, "I see thee still." and on thy blade and dudgeon gouts of blood. So now the dagger changed, because the blade as well as the handle of the dagger is covered with thick drops of blood, as if the murder had already been committed. And then he says, which was not so before. It wasn't there. There is no such thing. Macbeth convinces himself that the dagger is not real. It's an image of his guilty and horrified awareness of the evil action he is about to perform. So now on this slide in front of you, Macbeth imagines himself that he is in the company of various manifestations of evil. Hecate, which is the goddess of witchcraft. Murder is personified as a thin old man walking and quietly and secretly. And the eerie cry of the wolf, which indicates the time for the evil deed. And Tarquin, a cruel and corrupt Roman king. So Macbeth fully realizes that he will become evil if he commits murder. Remember, everything here is in his imagination. It is the bloody business which informed us to mine eyes. He's saying it is the murder of Duncan. Again, you will see throughout this scene and the next scene, neither he nor Lady Macbeth names the murder of Duncan. They talk about the bloody business. They use a euphemism to refer to the killing of Duncan. So he's saying it's the murder of Duncan that makes me see these things. So he's painfully aware of the sinful nature of the murder. And then if you look on the left-hand side of your screen, it's an explanation of all the things, the various manifestations of evil that he is imagining. He says it is very dark. So half of the world is in darkness as it is nighttime. So they are all asleep or dead. And wicked dreams are disturbing and invading and corrupting the privacy of sleep. And then he talks about witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings. So the offerings to the goddess of witchcraft and withered murder. This is where murder is personified as a very thin, deformed old man moving quietly and secretively, thus with his stealthy pace towards his victim under the cover of darkness. And then he is talking about the eerie cry of the wolf, which indicates the time for the evil deed. So the murderous signal or watchword is the wolf's howl. It indicates that it is time to attack. So, and then he talks about with Tarquin's ravishing strides. Now, Tarquin was a Roman king who raped his friend's wife secretly at night. He was their guest. And because of that, she committed suicide as a result of this. Macbeth identifies himself with Tarquin's betrayal of trust. So Macbeth identifies himself with Tarquin in this metaphor because we see both Tarquin and Macbeth were guilty of the ultimate betrayal of trust. Macbeth betraying Duncan and Tarquin betraying his best friend. Right, he continues on the slide in front of you to describe, he says, the murderer moves like a ghost, unseen, unnatural, frightening, and evil. And he is now imagining the stones crying out a warning to say where he is and thus preventing him from killing Duncan. So Macbeth knows the dreadful nature of the murder he is about to commit. He calls it the present horror. He does not want the awful silence that suits the deed of murder so well to be broken. He doesn't want to be seen or heard as he moves towards Duncan's room. Any noise may give away his whereabouts and prevent him from killing Duncan. And then here he says, words to the heat of deeds too cold breath gives. He feels that words often prevent action. In other words, talking about a deed instead of performing it cools one's enthusiasm. So he could still talk himself out of committing the murder. So he's almost saying, can I just stop talking about it and get it over already? And at that moment, the bell rings. And remember, that was the pre-arranged signal that Duncan is asleep and the guards was drugged and drunk and passed out. All right, it was ready. And then he says, I go and it is done. So Macbeth is ready to commit the murder. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, don't wake up, for it is a knell. Remember, a knell is a funeral bell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. Now, ironically, once Macbeth has overthrown the natural order of the world by murdering the king, he will have cut himself off from God and damned himself to hell. Thus, the knell, the funeral bell, is not only ringing for Duncan's death, it's also ringing for the end of his nobility and for the end of his hope of eternal life. So when Macbeth usurps the throne by murdering Duncan, he commits both regicide and sacrilege, because the king is God's representative on earth, and this is why the crime will damn him. Let's quickly look at the words that I just said that are written in this green block. Remember, a usurper is a person who takes a position of power illegally or by force, just like Macbeth did by killing Duncan in order to become King of Scotland. So he usurps the throne. Macbeth is known as a usurper. Then regicide. Now regicide is the action of killing the king. Right. Then sacrilege is violation or misuse of what is regarded as sacred. So it's a crime against God. You need to remember those words. And talking about the overthrow of the natural order and sacrilege, let's just remind ourselves the great chain of being, or the natural order of things. There it is, and it starts with the most important going down to the least important. God, angels, demons, stars, moons, kings. Remember, the king is God's representative on earth. And by committing regicide, the following will happen in the chain of being, or in the natural order. A murderer will become king. All right, murderers will become kings and queen. The witches became advisors. The earth becomes tied to hell instead of heaven. Thanes kill rather than protect. Good becomes evil. Even the plants and the animals are affected. That concludes Act 2, Scene 1. We are going to continue with a part of Scene 2 with the time we have left. So the summary of Act 2, Scene 2, it's a chamber in Macbeth's castle. Enter Lady Macbeth. So an extremely nervous Lady Macbeth, who has successfully drugged Duncan's guards, waits for Macbeth to return from Duncan's chamber. Macbeth enters with blood-stained hands, still carrying the daggers he used to kill Duncan. Right, he did not keep with the plan. Okay, he is overcome with guilt and remorse and describes his inability to speak the word Amen. He has also heard an imaginary voice that cried out that he would not be able to sleep again. Remember what I said about sleep. So sleeplessness represents the lack of peace of mind. Now, that is absolutely true about Macbeth. Lady Macbeth becomes aware of the daggers that should have been left with the guards. She commands him to return them and to smear the guards with blood, but he refuses, and she, scolding him, sets off to finish the task. Lady Macbeth returns, her hands also blood-stained. She hears somebody knocking at the gate and convinces Macbeth to retire to their room so that they can pretend to have been aroused from sleep when the murder is discovered. Right, so Lady Macbeth is nervously waiting here for Macbeth to commit the murder. And you'll see she says here, that which hath made them drunk hath made me bold. What hath quenched them hath given me fire. So she had to drink of the wine that made the attendants drunk. She needed to calm her nerves and restore her bravery and confidence. So this proves that she was not as callous and evil as she thought she was. Right, and then she is standing there, and remember, she's nervously waiting for Macbeth, and now she hears all kinds of noises, and she says, peace, it was the owl that shrieked, the fatal bellman. Now she describes the owl. The owl was seen as a bird of ill omen. She describes the owl hooting as the bellman, announcing death. Now, a bellman used to ring a bell in front of a condemned man's cell on the night before his execution. Similarly, a bellman led a funeral procession preceding the corpse to the grave. And then she says, which gives the sternest good night. So it gives a grim or a final farewell. So it's announcement of death soon to come. And then she says, he is about it. He is obviously Macbeth. He is about it. So Macbeth is busy committing the murder. And now in the next few lines, it's almost as if she's ticking off her little to-do list, what she had to do to make sure she did not miss anything. The doors are open. The grooms do mock their charge with snores. So the snores of the drunk guards make a mockery of their responsibility of guarding the king. So the doors are open. The grooms are sleeping sound asleep. They are snoring. I've drugged their possets. So it's their hot bedtime drink. I've drugged it. She put a lot of alcohol in there, so they did not expect the amount of alcohol she put in. And then she says that death and nature do contend about them whether they live or die. They are so heavily drugged, so they are so passed out that they appear to be dead. Death and life argue whether they are alive or dead. And then within, off stage, so we don't see anything, but we only hear it. Lady Macbeth also hears it. Who's there? What ho? So Macbeth imagines he hears a noise, and he makes the exclamation expressing his fear and agitation. So now she heard this, and her next reaction is, alack. So that's an expression of sorrow. What a pity. And now she thinks that they have not been successful. I'm afraid they've awaked. She's talking about the guards. She's afraid that the servants have woken up. And it is not done. The attempt and not the deed confound us. So she is afraid that the servants have woken up and the unsuccessful attempt to kill Duncan has been discovered and will now ruin them. All right, will destroy them. Okay, but ironically, both she and Macbeth will be destroyed, not by the failed attempt, but by the successful murder of Duncan. And again, she's again saying, but I did everything right. I put everything where it was supposed to be. I laid the daggers ready. So remember, part of the plan was to use the servant's daggers. So she put it ready so that Macbeth could see it, just take it and kill Duncan. He could not miss them. Macbeth could not miss them. He must have seen them, right? She put it ready for him to use. And then she goes on and she said, he had not resembled my father as he slept. I had done it. So she's saying if Duncan did not look so much like her father as he lay asleep, she would have killed him herself. Now this is the second sign of weakness and natural human feeling in Lady Macbeth. It shows that there's conflict in her too. At that moment, Macbeth enters and she says, "My husband." So that's a tone of almost relief and admiration. And then Macbeth answers her, "I have done the deed. I've committed the murder." Again, interesting enough, both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are still unable to mention the word murder. If you look at the slide in front of you, you will see this is very dramatic. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth talk in short, abrupt sentences. And then Macbeth asks, "Did thou not hear a noise?" And then she says, "Well, I only heard crickets and owls." And remember, they are seen as to foretell death. And she asked, "Did you not speak?" "When? Now?" "As I was coming down the stairs?" "Yes." "Who lies in the second chamber?" "Listen, who lies in the second chamber? Who lies in the bedroom next to the king's?" And she says, "Donalbain." And then Macbeth looked at his blood-covered hands. This is a sorry sight. It's a sad, miserable, painful, distressing sight. So Macbeth is appalled by the sight of his hands covered in Duncan's blood. This again portrays his feeling of guilt. And Lady Macbeth is almost dismissing him. A foolish thought to say a sorry sight. She says it's irrational to think like that about the murder. Remember, she's the practical one. She's making the plans. She's performing the actions, right? She is now in control. So she's almost telling him, "Oh no, there's no way, there's no reason for you to feel like this." And then Macbeth goes on and he says, "There's one did laugh in his sleep and one cried murder." So he says one of the princes laughed in his sleep and the other one screamed murder so loudly that they both woke up. Well, it's not clear whether it is only Macbeth's guilty conscience that made him hear this. And then he said, "I stood and heard them, but they did say their prayers and addressed them again to sleep." Now, bad dreams were believed to be caused by evil spirits, and that is why the men prayed when they woke up. If we look at Banquo in the beginning of Act 2, Scene 1, he also prayed to be protected from such bad dreams and addressed them again to sleep. So they prepared themselves for sleep again. So it's not clear who the them is. It's most probably Duncan's two sons. What, however, is very important here is that these people can find comfort in prayer and sleep, virtues which Macbeth has destroyed within himself. Right, and then Lady Macbeth are just saying they are sleeping in the same room, so it is possibly Malcolm and Donalbain. And then Macbeth goes on, he says, "One cried, 'God bless us,' and amen the other. As they had seen me with these hangman's hands, listening their fear, I could not say amen when they did say, 'God bless us.'" So first of all, he's saying, as they had seen me with these hangman's hands. So Macbeth here sees himself as an executioner. Now, in Shakespeare's time, a hangman was not only responsible for the actual hanging of victims, but in cases of treason, disemboweled, beheaded, and quartered the body. So it was chopped into 4 pieces. So he was unable to say amen to the prayer, "God bless us." And his inability to pray emphasizes that Macbeth has forever cut himself from all that is good in life, God's blessings and sleep. Again, Lady Macbeth, very unsympathetically and very practical. Consider it not so deeply. Don't think about it so very much. Don't consider it so deeply. Macbeth is just going on, "But wherefore could I not pronounce amen? I had most need of blessing, and amen was stuck in my throat." He realized that because of the sacrilegious murder, remember, crime against God, he has cut himself off from God and nature and will forever be damned. Then Lady Macbeth answers him, "These deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad." So she seems to believe that they can easily banish the thought of the sacrilegious murder from their minds, or else it will drive them crazy. And ironically, she is the one who is finally driven mad with guilt. And then Macbeth says, "Methought I heard a voice cry, 'Sleep no more.'" Remember what I told you when we spoke the first time about the theme of sleeplessness. Sleep is associated with a guilt-free conscience. Therefore, Macbeth believes correctly that he will never again experience the relaxing sleep of innocent people. And unlike his wife, he knows with a growing sense of horror that his guilt will haunt him forever. Right, this is all we have time for today. We are going to continue with Act 2, Scene 2 tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I will see you all again tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Make wise choices. Goodbye.